I'm sorry, who are you again? Blake asked, a smirk playing on his lips, the kind of smile that suggested he'd never once encountered a genuine obstacle. That was the exact moment the realization hit me, a cold, sharp bullet tearing through a decade of unwavering dedication. He uttered those words right in front of the entire analytics team during our Monday morning sprint, a project I had meticulously built from the ground up, a client I had personally brought into the fold back when Blake was still struggling to figure out how to work a spreadsheet. I stood there, clutching the quarterly projections deck, which I had stayed up until 3 a.m. meticulously refining. He acted as if he had no idea who I was, as though I were merely the intern delivering lukewarm coffee. "It's Ruby," I responded, my voice steady, like perfectly still water. "Lead data strategist." "Oh, right," he mumbled, giving a dismissive flick of his wrist as he glanced down at his phone. "I thought you'd moved on." "Not yet," I thought, "but keep pushing. You're giving me exactly what I need." Before Blake, my professional life was a perfectly calibrated machine, humming with precision, powered by sheer, unadulterated drive. 40-story glass facades, biometric scanners, organic kombucha in the break room, and veiled threats disguised as pleasantries in the executive suites. I understood the game when I joined Meridian Analytics. This wasn't a place for casual Fridays or emotional outbursts in private corners. This was a battlefield, fought in bespoke suits, and I had earned my scars. Burned out retinas from endless data visualizations, stress-induced headaches that seemed to have their own quarterly review cycle, and a roster of clients who placed their unwavering trust in my expertise. That profound trust was precisely why I had endured for so long. That and my undeniable results. I didn't boast or seek accolades, but the numbers themselves sang a triumphant chorus whenever I delivered. My most prized achievement was Eleanor Vance, the Vice President of Digital Transformation at Orion Global, an $80 million account with the immense power to either elevate or devastate our fiscal quarters. I had dedicated 5 years to ensuring they never had even a single reason to consider leaving. Thoughtful birthday cards for her twin daughters, late-night check-ins, a 6-hour flight rerouted once because she urgently needed on-site support in Miami. I genuinely cared. The firm, it seemed, did not. Blake arrived like a self-proclaimed startup guru in his mid-30s, his hair gelled with more conviction than his actual ideas, spouting buzzwords like disruptive innovation and synergy optimization while systematically gutting experienced staff as if we were nothing more than obsolete inventory. He plastered LinkedIn with his thought leadership threads about dismantling corporate hierarchies and insisted on daily stand-ups where the only thing that truly stood out was his inflated ego. The first month, he observed. The second, he took over key meetings. The third, he began to completely usurp control. I wasn't even invited to Eleanor's Q3 planning session, despite it being my account. No explanation was offered, just a conspicuous blank space on a calendar I once navigated with expert precision. Then came the restructured workflows, the innovative performance rubric where collaborative spirit inexplicably replaced client satisfaction, and suddenly, the entry-level analysts were receiving higher evaluations than I was. I opened my inbox one morning to discover a forwarded email from Blake, sharing one of my meticulously crafted proposals with the subject line. "Quick tweak to Ruby's traditional model. Does this feel more agile?" Agile, as if I were a cumbersome relic, not a human being. I didn't cry. I didn't march into HR. Instead, I calmly opened a new folder on my personal cloud drive titled "If This Goes Viral." I began meticulously archiving everything. Every email thread, every internal chat message, every glowing client testimonial. I took screenshots of Blake contradicting himself across 3 different internal documents. I re-downloaded my employment contract, then meticulously cross-referenced the state labor code regarding non-compete enforceability. Spoiler alert, they had none. Our state treats non-competes like stale bread. You simply discard it. And then I went quiet. That profound, dangerous quiet that descends when you realize you're no longer attempting to salvage anything. You are meticulously preparing to bury it. I reactivated my old, secure email account. I discreetly messaged a few former colleagues who had been summarily realigned by Blake's new vision. One of them, Lena, used to run our sophisticated predictive modeling until she was replaced by an off-the-shelf dashboard. Another, Marcus, was a veritable magician in client onboarding until his project access mysteriously vanished. I didn't ask for anything specific, just a simple, "Hope you're well. Let's grab coffee sometime." Every single one of them replied within the hour. I continued to show up on time, donning the blazer I affectionately called my armor. Let Blake run his little cult of mediocrity. I smiled politely through his condescending feedback about reimagining the client journey. I watched him high-five junior staff as if he had single-handedly invented mentorship. And I waited. I waited while Eleanor continued to call me on my personal cell. I waited while I meticulously filed my LLC paperwork in a quiet co-working space downtown. I waited while the corporate edifice around me began to crumble, making sure I already held the deed to the new foundation. It was precisely 10:17 a.m. on a Tuesday when my professional email pinged with a calendar invite titled Quick Sync, Leadership Alignment. No agenda, no prep materials, just a stark gray box from the CEO's executive assistant, marked mandatory. I knew what was coming even before I clicked it. There was something about the unsettling vagueness that felt too deliberately staged, like a dinner party where you're the only one oblivious that it's an intervention. The meeting room was already occupied when I arrived. Our CEO, Richard, wore designer vests like a form of corporate armor, and Blake perched at the head of the table like a frat boy who had somehow stumbled into a senior leadership role. HR was present too, Sarah. Her lips pressed so tightly they resembled a stitched seam. Richard offered that practiced corporate grimace people adopt just before delivering bad news, where empathy is nothing more than muscle memory. "Ruby, thanks for joining on such short notice. We just wanted to have an open dialogue about cultural alignment." I remained standing. Blake leaned forward, as if auditioning for a TED Talk. "We've been rigorously evaluating team dynamics through a new lens of agility and future readiness. It's become increasingly clear that some legacy roles, while undeniably valuable in the past, may not precisely map to the direction we're rapidly scaling toward." Translation: You're the past. I'm the shiny new pitch deck. Goodbye. Richard interjected, his eyes nervously darting toward HR, as if worried he might accidentally stray outside the legal lines. "This isn't about performance, Ruby. It's about evolution. It's about where we're headed as a firm." "Oh, I see," I replied. "And where exactly is that?" "The cliff," I thought. Sarah smoothly slid a folder across the polished table. Inside was a separation agreement, 6 weeks of severance, and a pre-written email I could send to ease the transition. "We're offering a very generous offboarding package," she stated, as if I were expected to curtsy. "Does it come with Blake's integrity? Or is that still on back order?" I deadpanned. Blake merely smiled, as if he genuinely believed I was joking. I took the pen they offered, signed the line without even bothering to read the fine print. The soft click of the pen echoed in the sterile room, sounding like a quiet gunshot. That's when I caught it, the faint flicker behind Richard's eyes, the unspoken question that seemed to say, "Why isn't she fighting this? Why isn't she begging?" Because I had already meticulously packed my bags. "Is that everything?" I inquired. Richard cleared his throat. "Of course, Ruby. We wish you nothing but the very best. Your contributions have been appreciated." "Sure," I said, "and your dental work looks incredibly natural." I didn't wait for their insincere handshakes. I walked out, my heels clicking rhythmically against the tile floor like a countdown clock. I bypassed the elevator and deliberately took the stairs, 7 flights, not because I had to, but because I wanted to feel each floor peel away from me like shedding old skin. My desk was already cleared, boxed up. Too neat, unsettlingly so. My beloved plants were gone. My favorite coffee mug that declared "Don't talk to me until Q2" was missing. A small blue post-it note read, "Property of facilities." I carried the box like a coffin, past the interns who suddenly found their computer screens riveting, past the glass-walled meeting room where someone else was already sitting in my chair, using my clicker, running my roadmap. No one met my gaze, except for Jules, my former assistant. She mouthed, "I'm sorry," from behind a finance report. I nodded once. We had said enough in silence. The lobby was bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, golden light catching on the polished marble floor. That's when I saw her, Eleanor, leaning casually against a decorative column as if she owned the entire building. She wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit and carried a leather-bound portfolio. She smiled, but not a wide, surprised smile. It was a knowing smile, as if she were privy to a secret. "You're early," she commented. I adjusted the box in my arms. "You're right on time." She glanced down at the folder peeking out of my box, then back up at my face. "They finally did it, didn't they?" she said. She didn't offer a platitude like "I'm sorry." Instead, she simply asked, "You hungry?" I nodded, because here's the crucial detail. I had a lunch scheduled with Eleanor that very day. It had been on the books for 3 weeks. Richard's calendar clearly showed it. I had seen it. No one had asked me to cancel, and I hadn't. I hadn't because I knew. Because when people like Blake believe they're playing a masterful game of chess, they often forget that some of us literally invented the board. The first time Eleanor and I sat across from each other, it was over rubber chicken at some abysmal industry conference in Phoenix. She was direct, deeply skeptical, and utterly weary of sales representatives trying to prove their innovative edge by flashing gradient blue bar graphs. I didn't pitch her anything. I simply listened. I asked her what she genuinely disliked about our competitors, and then, crucially, I asked her what she disliked about us. She provided both lists. I meticulously wrote them down. That's when she began calling me back. Over the years, we forged something far more profound than mere friendship. It was sharper than that. A mutual respect interwoven with the occasional dark humor about budget cycles and boardroom antics. She ran operations at Orion Global like a seasoned drill sergeant armed with an advanced spreadsheet. She cared nothing for branding fluff. She craved tangible solutions that actually worked and people who were unfailingly honest about timelines. And Meridian Analytics was slowly but surely beginning to fail both of those critical tests. By the time Blake arrived, Eleanor was already deeply irritated with the firm's increasingly meaningless pivot towards scalable synergies and off-site ideation retreats. After a particularly excruciating quarterly review, where Blake interrupted her 4 times in 6 minutes and then spectacularly mispronounced her CFO's name, she called me from her car. "You used to treat us like partners," she confided, her voice laced with frustration. "Now I feel like I'm buying from a vending machine that talks back." I didn't say much, just made a sound halfway between a sigh and a low growl. But later that week, as we sipped overpriced cold brew in a quiet booth at the Gables on Fifth, I finally asked her the question that had been persistently scratching at the back of my mind for months. "What if," I began slowly, "you worked with someone who truly listened? Who didn't care about empty buzzwords or flashy quarterly review presentations, just genuine, measurable outcomes?" Eleanor didn't flinch. She didn't laugh. She looked at me for a long, contemplative beat and then said, "You starting something?" I shrugged. "Not yet." She tapped her long nail on the rim of her cup. "If you do, I want a proposal." Quietly. That was 5 months before the firing. 2 months before I started sketching intricate organizational charts on cocktail napkins late at night. 1 month before I called Iris, my lawyer since my first unpaid internship, and asked her precisely what I would need to orchestrate a clean break if I ever chose to jump ship. "Start by forming the LLC," she advised. "Don't wait for the divorce to buy the new house. Our state doesn't enforce non-competes. You're not stealing clients if they voluntarily walk toward you." I then looped in Ray, my accountant, asking him how to structure the new entity to maintain airtight liability and impeccable tax compliance. "Make it boutique," he instructed. "Flat structure, lean operations. You want speed, not legacy." I filed the paperwork under a deliberately unexciting placeholder name. Zenith Solutions LLC. Clean, nondescript. The kind of name that doesn't scream anything until you witness the results. And still, I didn't pressure Eleanor. I didn't pitch. I didn't sell. I waited, because I instinctively understood what it felt like to be circled by predators in designer suits. The harder you pursue someone like her, the more stubbornly they dig in their heels. So, I gave her ample space. I continued diligently doing my job, continued delivering exceptional results, even as I watched the firm meticulously dig its own grave with every passing quarterly buzzword bonanza. Then came the lunch, just 2 weeks before the axe finally fell. We met at a charming, unpretentious hole-in-the-wall place Eleanor favored, because the tables were intimately cramped and the waiters never hovered over lentil soup and perfectly dry sourdough. She pulled out her tablet and simply said, "Okay, I'm ready." I blinked. "For what?" "Your idea. Show me what it looks like." I didn't even have to reach for my bag. The presentation deck was already there, meticulously prepared. Not branded, just simple, elegant slides, clear workflows, precise timelines, a sample team roster of people I trusted more than my own reflection. She read it cover to cover in less than 10 minutes, without speaking, just nodding a few times. Finally, she looked up and said, "You're underpaid, overqualified, and the only person I trust not to lie to me. Is that a yes?" "That's a let's keep talking." I walked out of that lunch feeling as if I were floating 2 inches above the pavement, already meticulously planning the next crucial steps in my head. Office space, legal retainer, insurance, hiring. I told myself I had time, that perhaps the firm would slowly implode, and I could gracefully ease my way out. But grace had never thrived in that concrete and glass edifice. So, when Richard handed me the folder, and Blake struggled to suppress his smirk, I felt something profoundly strange. Not fear, not even rage, just absolute clarity. Because this wasn't betrayal. It was evolution. And they had just inadvertently freed me to become the very thing they were too small to even comprehend. The email landed in Eleanor's inbox exactly 19 hours after I had calmly walked out of that building, my cardboard box in hand, my dignity wrapped in profound silence. Subject line: urgent, unauthorized client communication. Blake himself had drafted it, though the tone was unmistakably soaked in the cheap legal cologne clearly sprayed on by some compliance officer he had undoubtedly bribed with kombucha and corporate jargon. He had attempted to make it sound casual, a mere just flagging this kind of outreach. But between the lines was the unmistakable, panicked yelp of a dog that had just realized the back gate had been left wide open. "We just wanted to proactively reach out regarding any communications you may have received from Ruby Vance. As you know, she is no longer with Meridian Analytics, and while we wish her the best, we must also clarify that she is legally restricted from soliciting any of our clients. Engaging with her directly could be problematic for all parties involved. Problematic, as if I were some kind of corporate biohazard." Eleanor forwarded it to me with no subject line, no commentary, just that potent digital silence that conveyed far more than any screaming voicemail ever could. I read it 3 times, My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I simply took a deep, steadying breath, sipped my coffee, and typed a response I never sent. Tell him to eat glass. Instead, I called Iris. He's bluffing, she stated before I could even finish reading the email aloud. State law makes non-competes unenforceable. They'd have to prove malicious interference, and you've got meticulous documentation proving Eleanor approached you first. If they try anything louder than a warning, we'll answer with discovery, and Blake absolutely does not want discovery. Still, just for show, I pulled up my original employment contract and reread every single clause as if it were sacred scripture. I knew every inch of it already, having annotated it in red pen back when Blake first started inching toward my professional throne. No non-compete, no client exclusivity clause, and crucially, no language that prohibited a former employee from accepting business that came to them voluntarily. I could have thrown a BBQ in the parking lot, and as long as I didn't explicitly say, "Come work with me," I was legally untouchable. That didn't stop Meridian's legal team from trying. 3 days later, a thick, ominous envelope arrived on my doorstep via courier. Bold header, cease and desist. It was all bark, a flurry of accusations regarding circumventing client communication channels and retaining confidential insights. No specifics, just enough impenetrable legal jargon to rattle someone who didn't intimately understand the game. I mailed it back with a small post-it note that simply read, "Forward all further inquiries to my attorney. Also, tell Blake I like the paper stock." Very luxurious. But it wasn't just me they were desperately scrambling to contain. Within the week, I received a call from Carla Tran, a vice president at a mid-sized logistics firm I used to manage before Blake redistributed the portfolio to optimize synergies. She sounded utterly livid. "Ruby, who the hell is running your old team now?" "Why?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. They just sent over a scope document with 4 typos, a pricing tier we explicitly didn't agree on, and a paragraph copy-pasted directly from our competitor's website. I almost apologized out of ingrained habit, then remembered I no longer owed Meridian Analytics a single polished syllable. "They even spelled my name wrong," Carla added, her voice dripping with indignation. "And I've been a client for 6 years." I bit my lip. Was it Blake? Some kid named Brett? Looked about 12. Said he was Blake's strategic protege. I asked him to explain our account history, and he actually said he'd circle back once he read the archives. I swear, if he says circle back one more time, I'm going to file a harassment suit. Another one, I thought. Then came a LinkedIn message from Jackson Pham, a former client at TechFlow Solutions, another account I had meticulously built from the ground up before Blake haphazardly sliced it up like leftover casserole. His message was succinct. "Hey, did you leave Meridian or did they finally implode? Either way, free for lunch next week." That was the undeniable shift. That was the precise moment the fear completely shattered, like rotten ice, because this wasn't just about Eleanor anymore. The ripple was rapidly widening. Blake wasn't just fumbling the handoff, he was fumbling the entire damn playbook. He believed if he barked loud enough, the clients would simply acquiesce. But they hadn't come to us because of Meridian. They had come to us because I showed up when it mattered most, because I remembered their kids' names, because I made them feel like they weren't just revenue streams in overpriced shoes. And Blake? He was swiftly learning that charm doesn't scale, especially not when it's utterly fake. So, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the cease and desist letter still lying unopened on the counter, and smiled. I didn't need to poach anyone. They were already walking toward me. I didn't send a single recruitment email. No cold calls. No exciting new opportunity LinkedIn blasts. No poaching. No promises. No desperation. I simply started showing up, quietly. A Tuesday lunch with Lena, my old analytics lead, at a cozy Thai place neither of us had tried before. We didn't discuss the firm for the first 30 minutes, just swapped amusing horror stories about landlords and debated which streaming services were still worth the subscription price. Then, over Pad CU and an extra bottle of sparkling water, she leaned in and said, "You were the only reason I didn't completely lose my mind back there." I didn't respond, just sipped my drink. "If you ever do anything," she added, her voice firm, "I want in." 3 days later, I met Marcus, the onboarding wizard Blake had unceremoniously discarded because he wasn't brand forward enough. We sat on a park bench, coffee lids still steaming, pigeons flapping around like they knew deep secrets. "Brett tried to run my playbook," Marcus muttered, shaking his head. "Lost a 6-figure client in 2 weeks. You could practically feel the panic in the internal chat channels." "I'm not recruiting," I stated, "just catching up." He nodded. "And I'm just handing you this because it conveniently fell into my lap." He subtly slipped me a folded printout, a spreadsheet of meticulously detailed time logs and client hours recorded on dates where absolutely no work had been done. Double entries, phantom meetings. It was as if someone had rubber-stamped every line item with a casual shrug. Blake's team was fabricating invoices, so obviously, I half expected to find LOL in the memo column. I didn't say anything. I didn't even raise an eyebrow. I simply slid it into my bag and smoothly changed the subject to baseball. But my pulse was doing cartwheels. I was walking a perilous tightrope with a pocket full of explosive information. Every conversation was a delicate balance between genuine curiosity and plausible deniability. I never initiated. I never pitched. I simply listened. People wanted to talk. They needed to talk. Meridian's culture had devolved into a meat grinder operating within a glass tower, and the relentless churn was making people sloppy and increasingly scared. One night, my phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. An unknown number. I almost let it ring, but something in my gut told me to pick up. "Hi," the voice whispered, shaky and young. "Is this Ruby Vance?" "Yes," I replied. "I don't know if I should be calling, but I was on that call, the one with Blake where he said the invoice numbers just needed to look cleaner. I have the recording. I didn't mean to." Zoom auto-recorded, and I saved it. I sat up in bed, my heart cold and still, as if it were afraid to move. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I thought someone should know, and I trust you more than anyone still working there." Her name was Tina, a junior analyst, just 2 years out of college, still remembered birthdays, and always said thank you after team meetings. She sounded terrified, but her voice was clear. "I haven't shared it with anyone yet," she confided, "but if they come after you harder, I will." I told her to do nothing, to stay invisible, to protect herself above all else. But inside, I knew what I was now holding. Irrefutable proof. I didn't need to retaliate. I didn't need to throw stones. The house was already teeming with termites. All I had to do was open a window and let the wind in. And still, I was careful. I didn't tell Eleanor. Not yet. I didn't use the spreadsheet. I didn't forward the recording to Iris. I waited, because timing matters more than truth in wars like these. Instead, I scheduled more lunch dates, more casual walks, more "how have you been?" phone calls. I watched the cracks widen as former coworkers and disillusioned clients traced their fingers along the deepening fault lines. Not a single one needed convincing. I was no longer just a person with a plan. I was a powerful magnet. And Meridian Analytics? They were merely metal filings, waiting to jump. Eleanor didn't send an email. She didn't text. She simply showed up. It was early, around 8:12 a.m., just as the sun was beginning to scrape across the downtown towers, painting them with a gold peeling-off aluminum light. I was sitting in the bustling cafe 2 blocks from what used to be my office, sipping black coffee that tasted faintly of ambition and ash. She slid into the seat across from me. No greeting, no hesitation, just that same intense look she always had when things were about to become undeniably real. "It's time," she stated, setting a sleek leather folder on the table. "I've reviewed the proposal, run it past legal, compliance signed off yesterday. We're ready to transition." The immense weight of her words didn't hit me like a trumpet blast. It settled slowly and heavily, like fresh snowfall on a cracked roof. I blinked once, then twice. "You're sure?" Eleanor offered a small, sharp smile. "I've never been more insulted by a vendor than I have in the last 2 quarters, and I once worked with a partner who misspelled my name on 3 consecutive contracts." I opened the folder. Signature page. Retainer agreement. I'm lined for offboarding from Meridian. She wasn't just walking. She was walking fast, clean, and with every single piece of documentation perfectly in order. I didn't cheer. I didn't toast. I simply reached into my bag and smoothly slid over a slim folder of my own. Internal team structure, billing framework, onboarding roadmap. She read the cover page, then looked at me. "You really built it," she said. "Yeah," I replied softly, from the parts they left behind. We shook hands. No photos, no celebratory smiles. Just ink on paper and the quiet thud of a new empire beginning. That afternoon, I made the calls. Lena first, then Marcus, then 3 others, people who had slipped through the cracks at Meridian, deemed redundant or not forward-facing enough. I called them not because they were loyal, but because they were brilliant, scarred, perhaps, but utterly unshakable. People who knew how to work without pretense, people who would bleed to meet a deadline, not to win an empty award. They didn't even hesitate. Marcus showed up that night with a laptop and a bottle of fine whiskey. "When do we start?" "Now," I declared. Lena sent over a draft onboarding document before midnight, a document superior to anything Blake's army of fresh graduates could have cobbled together with AI and desperate prayers. I rented a temporary suite inside a co-working space with industrial cement floors and delightfully leaky pipes. It smelled faintly of ambition and industrial cleaner. The Wi-Fi was spotty, the coffee was consistently burnt, but when we all crammed around that cheap conference table and began sketching out our very first client kickoff, it felt like breathing again. No ego, no posturing, just pure competence humming like power lines in a thunderstorm. We called ourselves Quietly. No press releases, no grand launch party. We didn't need noise. We had substance. Then the RFPs started subtly leaking. One was from a global logistics client I hadn't spoken to in 6 months. The document landed in my inbox via an anonymous tip. Someone in their procurement team still had my number. It was practically a love letter to the exact kind of consultancy we were building. Personalized, agile, no nonsense. Then came another, a medical supply chain company. Same story, sent through a burner Gmail account, asking for a values-forward boutique partner who prioritizes relationship continuity. It was a dog whistle, and I heard it loud and clear. Clients weren't just disillusioned, they were actively looking, and they were looking directly in my direction. Still, I didn't chase. I didn't respond. I simply read them, filed them, and meticulously circled dates on my calendar. But even as momentum steadily built, something deep inside me wouldn't rest. I was winning, yes, but every step forward still carried the lingering shadow of that sterile conference room, that patronizing smirk from Blake, the unsettling echo of Richard's limp apology. I wasn't bitter. I was scorched. Eleanor suggested the lobby meeting. I knew exactly what she meant. "Coincidence," she said on the phone, a hint of amusement in her voice. "I'll just be in the neighborhood around the same time you're picking up your benefits paperwork. Maybe we'll bump into each other. I said nothing for a moment. Then, should I wear red? She laughed. No, be subtle. I smiled into the receiver. Subtle is precisely what had brought us this far. And as I hung up, I realized I didn't need revenge. I needed them to watch, to see me standing right there, in their lobby, with the future they had carelessly let walk out the door. I wasn't burning bridges. I was replacing them. The moment I stepped through the revolving doors, I felt it, like walking back into a dream I had already profoundly outgrown. The same impeccably polished floors, the same faint citrus scent pumped through the vents, meant to mask the underlying stench of ambition and fear. The same receptionist with the same tired smile. Only this time, she didn't greet me. She merely looked up, clocked the folder in my hand, and glanced away as if I were contagious. I was there for one thing, my final check and a folder of leftover benefits paperwork HR had stubbornly refused to mail. Company policy, they'd claimed. Translation: they wanted me back in the building. They wanted to see if I would grovel, cry, or perhaps they just wanted to feel taller one last time. But I hadn't come alone. Eleanor entered through the side entrance, her leather heels tapping like war drums on the tile. She wasn't pretending. No disguise, no coat pulled over her face. Just her usual charcoal suit, hair pulled into a bun sharp enough to cut glass, and a thick folder tucked under her arm. We met by the third-floor lobby seating, just outside the HR conference room. I didn't sit. She didn't either. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice low and even. "As I'll ever be," I replied. She held up the folder. "Signatures are finalized. We're pulling out at quarter close. They'll feel it on the next earnings call." I took a deep breath, truly inhaling for what felt like the first time since the day they had fired me. The hallway behind us buzzed with fake productivity, heels on tile, muted laughter, chat pings bouncing between cubicles. Nobody was looking yet, but they would. And then, like a cliché straight out of a corporate drama, Blake appeared, rounding the corner, an espresso in one hand, his phone in the other, doing his usual arrogant strut, shoulders back as if he had personally invented leadership. His eyes landed on us mid-sentence. He paused, squinted, and then you could practically see it click. He stopped cold. The phone slowly lowered, his jaw clenched, and then, in a tone loud enough to shatter the manufactured calm, "Ruby, what the hell are you doing here? You need to stay away from our clients." Every head in the surrounding area snapped up. Desks turned, conversations froze. Even the fake ficus by the copier looked like it wanted to watch. Eleanor turned to face him, calm as a placid lake before a hurricane. "I was finalizing our new contract with her," she stated, every word cutting like a scalpel. "We're leaving you." The words echoed. You could feel the oxygen suddenly leave the floor. Somewhere down the hall, someone dropped a pen. Blake stood there, blinking, as if he hadn't prepared for the profound possibility that the world would not forever orbit around his ego. "No, you can't just—" "I can," Eleanor interjected, cutting him off. "And I did." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. She simply turned back to me, handed over a signed copy of the transition plan, and said, "I'll have the team reach out Monday. Good luck with the audit." And just like that, she walked out. I stood frozen, folder in hand, Blake breathing heavily behind me as if he were frantically trying to summon a rebuttal, but couldn't find the vocabulary for failure. I didn't turn around. I simply walked to the front desk, signed the HR release papers, and left the building without looking back. But I didn't need to, because behind me, the whispering had already begun. Did she say contract? Wait, Eleanor's account? Did they lose Orion Global? The internal chat channels lit up like a Christmas tree in a meth lab. I knew it without even seeing the screen. Somewhere in the dark bowels of that building, Richard would be sweating through his designer vest. HR would be frantically running risk assessments. Legal would be making urgent calls for damage control. And Blake? He'd be desperately trying to rewrite history fast enough to save his own skin. But it was too late. They didn't just lose a client, they lost the client, and everyone knew it. The internal chat system exploded like a dropped match in a fireworks warehouse. First came the passive-aggressive emojis, those ominous red exclamation marks after Blake's urgent message regarding recent developments in our client portfolio. Then came the thinly veiled chaos threads, spinning off like rogue satellites. Hashtag client alert, hash escalation, hashed Eleanor, hash brand risk assessment. Someone tagged legal. Someone else posted a screenshot of a client's auto-reply that read, "We're evaluating our partnership moving forward." And then a file popped up, an RFP request from Orion Global, addressed directly to Zenith Solutions LLC. Open. Public. Unfiltered panic. By noon, Blake was confined to a war room with 3 senior partners, Richard included. The word was, he tried to spin it, claiming Eleanor was coerced, misled, emotionally manipulated. Someone in the room, likely one of the few remaining clear-headed individuals, asked for proof. He had none. By 1 p.m., he was as white as printer paper, pacing frantically, his blazer off, his deodorant failing him. Then another shoe dropped. Carla Tran's company formally terminated their retainer, citing a pattern of billing irregularities and a decline in operational integrity. The statement was short, clean, lethal. They'd even CC'd legal. Inside was the final proof. Carla didn't even take the exit call. She simply had her assistant forward a Dropbox folder overflowing with errors, some of which Blake had personally approved. By the time a second client quietly walked away, no press, just a vacuum of revenue and a note that simply stated ethical misalignment, the partners began whispering terms like breach, fiduciary exposure, and emergency vote. I didn't witness any of it. I was at home, comfortably in sweatpants, calmly slicing peaches and listening to Miles Davis. That's when HR emailed. Subject: questions regarding client departure. They didn't accuse me of anything, just asked for clarification, as if perhaps I'd slipped and bumped into Eleanor on accident, as if maybe we could talk this through, water under the bridge. They even used the phrase mutual understanding, which is corporate speak for please don't sue us for defamation. I forwarded it to Iris. She responded with a single line. All communication should go through counsel moving forward. Also, they're scared. Enjoy it. But I didn't enjoy it. Not really. I watched from the outside as the building I once sacrificed my sleep, my health, and damn near my entire identity for began to cannibalize itself. Richard held an all-hands call where he tried desperately to sound steady, but stumbled awkwardly over the phrase, strategic resilience. Someone leaked a screenshot of Blake sweating through a one-on-one meeting where he tried to blame interns for invoice padding. Then the ultimate post dropped, Eleanor's LinkedIn, a full-throated, beautifully restrained testimonial, delivered with the surgical precision of a courtroom exhibit. True leadership is rare. It doesn't scream. It delivers. I'm proud to announce our new partnership with Zenith Solutions, led by the incomparable Ruby Vance. Sometimes the people who make the biggest impact aren't the loudest in the room. They're just the ones who refuse to cut corners. Onward. The engagement on that post exploded. Comments from C-suite executives, operations leads, consultants from 3 continents. Messages like, about time, long overdue, following closely. Congrats. Some of those names were still technically under contract with Meridian. That post didn't just make a statement. It hung a glaring vacancy sign outside their ivory tower. Clients started subtly poking around, quietly, carefully, but they were definitely looking. Justice came not with sirens, but with silence, with inboxes that stopped pinging, with phone lines that stopped ringing, with corridors that echoed too loudly when Blake walked through them now. I didn't smile. I didn't dance. I simply watched the dominoes fall and wondered how I ever thought that place deserved even a fraction of my loyalty in the first place. That night, at 6:12 p.m., I received a text. Unknown number. Ruby, this is Scott Beltram, senior partner, Meridian. Off the record. Can we talk? I stared at it. My stomach didn't flip. My hands didn't shake. I simply typed back, "Depends what about." His reply came seconds later. "Let's just say some of us are tired of betting on the wrong horse. I have a proposition. One I don't trust anyone else to hear." Scott Beltram looked precisely like every high-dollar partner who had never genuinely gotten his hands dirty. A suit worth more than my first car, a luxury watch peeking out just enough to imply effortless importance, and that practiced grimace executives adopt when they're about to utter something they believe sounds humble. We met in the back of a boutique hotel bar, one of those faux rustic places with exposed Edison bulbs and $19 cocktails named after obscure philosophers. He didn't order anything, just leaned in across the reclaimed wood table like this was a scene from a spy film. "I'll be straight," he began. "You're bleeding us out." I raised my eyebrows but didn't speak. I let the silence breathe, letting him feel the pressure. "We want to make you an offer." "Not out of desperation," he added, the lie so glaringly obvious I didn't even blink, "but to reposition the value chain. White label. We fold a portion of our client portfolio under your brand. On paper, it's seamless. Behind the curtain, you manage the service delivery. You keep your margins. We retain appearance. Everyone wins." Everyone except Blake, I thought, who I assumed was currently hiding in a supply closet, frantically writing LinkedIn posts about learning through adversity. Scott slid a folder across the table, a detailed breakdown of clients, robust revenue projections, a lump sum figure that could fund my nascent company for a decade. I closed the folder without even reading a single word. "No." His jaw visibly shifted. "I don't think you understand that." "I understand perfectly," I stated, my voice calm and utterly final. "You want to borrow my credibility because yours is in free fall. You want the appearance of continuity without earning it, and you want to insulate yourselves while I take all the risk. I didn't walk through fire just to light your path." He said nothing. "I appreciate the offer," I added, "but I've already built something far better." I stood, thanked him for the meeting, and left without looking back. The office wasn't sprawling, but it was unequivocally mine. A third-floor corner suite with soaring high ceilings, freshly painted walls still smelling faintly of new beginnings, sunlight cutting cleanly through the windows as if it had been patiently waiting for me. Minimalist design. No clutter, no unnecessary noise. Just a sleek matte black desk, a bookshelf half full of trusted strategy texts and cherished client thank you notes, and a single frame on the wall. A photo of the original Zenith team crowded around a folding table, laughing, mouths full of takeout noodles. On the frosted glass door, meticulously applied vinyl letters read, "Ruby Vance, Zenith Solutions." The first time I saw my name there, I stood and traced the letters with my finger, half expecting them to vanish. On my desk was a chilled bottle of champagne, its gold foil catching the light. Taped to it was a note in Eleanor's distinctive, angular handwriting. "We made the right choice." I sat down, finally. Not rushing, not fighting, not defending my seat at someone else's table. I was the damn table now. I poured a glass, let the bubbles fizz out and settle, took a long, satisfying sip, then another. My phone buzzed once. News alert. Longtime consultancy suffers mass client defection. Insider says they bet on the wrong person. I smiled, not the smug kind, Not the revenge-fueled kind. The kind you wear when the noise finally fades, the doors quietly close, and you realize the war is truly over, and you won. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers. The story of Ruby's journey teaches us that true value isn't always recognized or rewarded in conventional corporate structures. It highlights the importance of integrity, genuine relationships, and unwavering competence. Even when faced with betrayal and dismissal, Ruby chose to focus on building something new, something better, rather than succumbing to bitterness. The positive message is that personal conviction and the trust you build with others are far more powerful than corporate politics or superficial posturing. When you truly deliver exceptional results and foster authentic connections, your reputation will precede you, and opportunities will find you. Your true worth cannot be dictated by someone else's narrow vision. It is cultivated through consistent effort, deep care, and the courage to forge your own path, even when it feels like everything is against you. Ultimately, success is not just about winning battles, but about building something meaningful that stands the test of time, proving that genuine talent and ethical practice always prevail.